I give up. I've been trying to figure out where the next phase, where the next months, what the next day is going to happen in this Russian Ukraine conflict. And what happened over the last 24 hours is something that I was like, well, I did not see that coming. And apparently, neither did any pundit that dedicates 10 times more effort and free time than I do to covering this, to watching this, absorbing this information like a sponge. I don't know. Maybe it's because of my Russian heritage. And yes, I'm of Russian heritage, for those of you who don't know. My grandmother is from the motherland. And I can remember as a kid, well, first, one of the things I do remember is she would have Russian periodicals sent to her house. And I always remember looking at them and being like, why are half these letters backwards? And why are some of these not even letters? Like, this just looks like gibberish. But, anyways, my mother, excuse me, my mother, well, my mother's mother, my grandmother came from Russia. And one of the things that she did along with her church during the Soviet Union era, this was before the collapse of the Soviet Union, is they would help get people here through the works of her church, the Russian Orthodox Church that she was a member of, to get them from the Soviet Union and get them to places like America safely. And all I can remember that sticks out the most from what my grandmother said is that people don't like it in Russia, but people, when you're in Russia, you don't complain about it because you'll get a life worse than living in Russia. And I feel that is the temperature of Russia today, where, I'm always saying things like, why don't Russians just take to the streets and whatever? Because there is, I understand that there is a fear. That there is a fear of, getting your door kicked down and your face kicked in by the KGB, by the FSB, for doing so, for speaking out against Putin. Putin. I like to call him Putin. I don't know. It just sounds more natural to associate his name with puke. Anyway, um, so I get that a lot of people in Russia don't want this war with Ukraine. A lot of people just in general around the world do not want war. The majority of people that want war are the power-hungry people that get to power. I understand that. But the bottom line is that Russia, I know people are going to go like, oh, the expansion of NATO, that's what really caused it. But no, Russia crossed into the damn borders. That's the crux of the problem here, people, not the expansion of NATO years ago. Get all the violations of the Budapest Memorandum that Russia did. Anyway. So, in a way, I feel bad for Russia, and I don't, because I understand a lot of people in Russia are like my grandmother that lived in the motherland under the Soviet Union, got to America, and her parents got to America with her, and were just glad to be out of there. And one of the things that I've learned from studying this is that Moscow, and specifically Muscovites, have a high disapproval outside of Moscow and St. Petersburg. And granted, there's still a contention between Moscow and St. Petersburg that I didn't know. But watching channels like NFKRZ, Archer Rahe, Dennis Demi, why am I forgetting his name off the top of my head? Dennis Demidov. Oh my God. Sorry, Dennis. I forgot your last name. Davidov. Excuse me, Dennis. In hearing these channels talk about how, you realize people don't like Moscow. Moscow is this city that gets a bulk amount of the tax revenue from everyone else, gets their pretty little palaces, gets the streets paved with gold for the millionaires that live there. And Putin is someone that keeps the machine going, keeps the well-oiled machine going, and makes sure that, if there's going to be a special military operation, a lot of you guys and your sons, in Moscow, you're safe. In St. Petersburg, you're safe. We're gonna take a lot of the Mongolians out in the east side. We'll send them to the front lines first. And there's so many layers that build up against a Russian hatred, a Russian national hatred towards the Muscovites, towards the St. Petersburgians, whatever, I don't know what their abbreviated name is. Anyway, but what we had happen yesterday It just makes this is when I just said I'm done trying to figure out or predict where things are going next. I can't tell you with certainty that Putin is going to be in power tomorrow or he's going to be in power for 10 years to come. I give up. Yevgeny Prigozhin, you know, isn't a professional military man. He's a professional criminal, a professional chef to Vladimir Putin. Um, but he's a guy that I think he made the biggest 4D chess move to save his life and his men's lives in doing this military coup and showing that he can march into Russia with his men, march up to Moscow, and get very little resistance. You're hearing stories that choppers were commanded by the Russian high command to open fire on Prigozhin's troops, and some of them stand down. Some of them fired, and some of the choppers actually got taken down by Prigozhin's guys. But I would like to say that, you know, Putin isn't gonna last from this because he looks so weak. Just 24 hours ago, he was saying this heinous act against the motherland, this betrayal, this backstabbing will go fully punished. To 24 hours later, it's like, okay, they're going to stand down, so we're just going to let them move to Belarus, exile there. Like, what? Mr. Firm Fist, Mr. Threaten to use nukes, the guy that comes in and threatens to take over Moscow is just going to be like, okay, well, you know, hey, it's a bit of a misunderstanding. We're going to let him go. How can the people in power around Putin allow this guy to be their leader? Like, this seems like such a pussyfoot move that, like the only thing I could say here to relate this to American terms is if the January 6th insurrection, whatever you want to call it, riots, whatever, I don't care, whatever term you want to use for it, is if that happened. Now, I know people are going to say, well, the big difference there is Prigozhin's troops never got into Moscow. Again, I'm trying to think of something that closely relates to this. If you think of a better example, leave it in the comments. But if what happened on January 6th happened and the sitting president, even if it was Trump, the election got overturned and Trump ended up getting back in office again. And Trump said, we're not going to punish anyone that did that. Like, there would be such an insane out. Like, what do you mean you can't punish anyone that broke into Congress? That's the closest thing I could think of. You had these people take over entire cities. The entire Rostov-on-Don Oblast got taken over, and two other oblasts north of Rostov got taken over by militant, quote, freedom fighters that were all Russian, that were speaking ill. Their head, Prigozhin, was talking smack on the regular lately about Vladimir Putin. And he's going to go away unpunished for leading a military coup 200 kilometers away from Moscow? My mind can't fathom how Putin is going to survive this. But then again, as I've said, I've given up predicting how this war is going to go. I wouldn't be surprised if they came out. They're creating a new title for Vladimir Putin, Supreme Chancellor of the Galaxy. That's what he's going to be known as now. This is just such insanity. And in the meantime, there's still a full-blown war raging on. And one of the main reasons why Prigozhin is marching in Moscow to, quote-unquote, take the elites out of power and take over the war and do it his way is because the war has been going so poorly. He's the one telling the truth, saying, don't believe the numbers. Putin is the one being fed yes men numbers, people that aren't going to tell him the truth. Prigozhin himself, a guy in the front lines that's in the thick of things, seeing his men die, is telling you that Russia's numbers are exaggerated tenfold under what they are. If they tell you they lost 10 tanks, that means they lost 100. If they lost 100 men, that means they lost 1,000. This is one of your frontline generals telling you this. What are you going to believe? The guys in Moscow that haven't been to the front lines for one day in this war? Or are you going to believe Prigozhin? Why would Prigozhin lie about this? That's why he's fed up. That's why he's storming into Russia with his guys saying, treat this war better or just get out of office completely. Get out of Ukraine completely. And that's one thing I really don't understand is Prigozhin on one hand will say, this war should have never been started. It was just guaranteed to be a slaughter on both ends. It's a slaughter that Russia doesn't need to be a part of. But at the same time, he's saying, let me be in charge and this war will be done right. It's like, what? I don't know. I couldn't tell you if come tomorrow, tactical nukes are going to be going off in Ukrainian battlefields tomorrow. But I'm just beyond fascinated, obsessed, and just worried above everything else. Because again, this is a war with worldwide ramifications. I understand if war is not your thing and following stuff, and you just want to keep suffering out of sight, out of mind. But man, this is such a world-altering conflict that is going on. I mean, again, I understand if war isn't people's things, but this is some serious shit, people. That's all I can say. Anyway, since I'm giving up predicting, you guys sound off. And if someone nails this in the comments, leave a comment. What do you think is going to happen? Do you think that Ukraine is going to storm through and cut the land hold to Crimea in half, sever that, take over Crimea? Like, again, I don't know. I don't know. I know what I think. I don't care to predict anymore because shit is just in Russia, sense not make. That's what I'm going by now. Anyway, sound off in the comments. What the hell is going to happen next, and how is this all going to end? Because I'm done trying to tell you guys or predict for you guys. I don't know. Maybe I'll put some options on the ground and let New Dog pick them for us. That is all.